When you hear BMF, what comes to mind? Is it money, power, or respect? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the unbelievable rise and fall of the Black Mafia Family, BMF, a criminal empire that shook America. From the gritty streets of Detroit to the lavish nightlife of Atlanta and the sun-soaked yacht parties of Miami, this is a saga of ambition, extreme wealth, and inevitable downfall. BMF is one of the biggest underground operations in American history. Millions of dollars, dozens of mansions, supercars, music labels, and so much more. This is an incredible story about how guys from the bottom infiltrated the mainstream world, from the treacherous streets of Detroit to yacht parties in Miami. But before we unravel the twists and turns of their story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Let's jump in. This is the story of the Black Mafia family. The story begins in Detroit, Michigan. Once the wealthiest city on the planet in the 1950s, the growth of General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler brought thousands of jobs to the Detroit area. And of course, just as many Americans migrated north to fill these positions. So for 15 years, Detroit was flourishing, and life was as good as it gets. But like all societies, things eventually took a downward turn. In the 1960s, factory workers went on strike and rallied for higher pay. In response, the car companies moved their operations overseas. And because of this, unemployment riddled the city. By 1968, Detroit was a new city, completely unrecognizable by its former residents. Abandoned houses, schools, debris in the streets, and out-of-control crime. Detroit was now a dark place, but nowhere was worse off than Southwest Detroit. Early life of the Flannery brothers. Southwest Detroit consists of about 10 neighborhoods, but for this video, we start off in Boynton. The area is cut off by a river from the rest of the city, really making it its own community. This is truly the bottom of the bottom. So let's head down a dark, abandoned alley all the way to the dead end. 1555 Edger Street, one of 3 functional houses on the entire block. Here is where 2 brothers were born. Demetrius was good-looking, charismatic, and flashy. On the other hand, the younger Terry was more reserved and under the radar. Needless to say, the 2 brothers were polar opposite personalities, but despite their differences, they always shared one common trait. Since a very young age, the Flannerys always had a knack for hustling and getting money. From junior high school, the 2 hustled and sold anything they could get their hands on. Both were equally as gifted. They just went about it in completely different ways. Demetrius, also known as Meech, was flashy and always wanted the girls to see him as well. Meanwhile, Terry hated the attention and always wanted to remain low-key. The rise of the 50 boys, this will later be relevant, but for now, we focus on how they got their start. By the time Meech was a junior in high school, his hustling ways had gotten serious. A steady income of $1,000 a week went a long way back in this time. Regardless, this was still a very small operation, especially compared to what was going on in East and West Detroit. Knowing Meech's personality, he was not happy staying at this level. Well, in 1984, one of his friends named Kilo thought of a plan. Kilo's uncle was a man named E.D. Boyd, and this guy was a large distributor between Miami and Detroit. So Kilo's plan was to set up a meeting between his uncle and Meech. Well, eventually the meeting took place, and Meech made a great impression on E.D. He demonstrated the drive and determination to strike it rich. So the very next day, they started working together. They came up with a plan unlike any other in Detroit. They started selling $50 bags, far lower than anyone else in Detroit. Well, because of this, more and more customers began rushing in, so they needed to expand. Meech would invite his brother Terry and his best friend Derek Meeks to help out. And from here, the operation took off. Due to their reputation for $50 bags, they became known as the 50 Boys of Southwest Detroit. Meech's flashiness and these warnings, people traveled from all over the map to come to get them, even neighboring states. By the start of 1985, Big Meech was wearing gold chains and mink coats and driving foreign cars. But as we know, A life like this can get out of hand fast. So, in order to keep everyone in check, Edie called a meeting at his house every Sunday night. Here, the 50 boys ate dinner together and discussed what was going on in the streets. Early on, a big topic they battled over was Meech's flashiness. Edie was trying to school him on why he shouldn't be outside looking like $1,000,000. It draws all of the wrong attention. Well, Meech of course was not going to stop being flashy, and this would come back to haunt him later on. The feud with Leighton Simon begins, but for now, we focus on the early days in Detroit. ED. Boyd had a long-lasting feud with a man named Leighton Simon, also known as the Beast. This rivalry started years before the 50 Boys even existed. Essentially, Leighton was a competitor, and he controlled an area called 12th Street. Edie and Leighton Simon were big respected bosses, so they never tried to harm each other. Well, rumors say that in June of 1985, both Leighton Simon and the 50 Boys attended a boxing match in Las Vegas. The event was held at the infamous Caesars Palace, and all kinds of ballers were in attendance. Well, out of all these people, somehow Leighton Simon and Big Meech were standing right next to each other the whole time. And of course, Meech decided to test his gangster. He kept bumping into me and, you know what I'm saying? It was crowded. It was crowded. You know, I understand that. I can understand maybe 2 or 3 bumps. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying, my man, you bump me one more time, there's gonna be a problem in this B. Meech walked away. Leighton already disliked ED, but now he had a hatred for the 50 Boys. Chaos erupts. Leighton Simon versus 50 Boys. Unfortunately, this would start to cost them. And that takes us to 1987, the year that changed everything. At just 15 years old, Terry Flannery was already a star in Detroit. So like his brother, Terry wanted a nickname as well. So, in order to pay homage to a local kingpin named Southwest T, Terry decided to adopt his name. Well, when he heard the news, the original Southwest T was conflicted. On one hand, the name was in homage to his legacy, but on the other hand, it was kind of disrespectful. Well, coincidentally, not too long after, he found out that Terry was hanging out with some of his girls. And of course, this is what tipped him over the edge. The break-in incident, the party saw a golden opportunity. September 17, 2003, 7 in the morning. 3 men break into the B.M.F. mansion through the garage. They make their way into the living room and bam, the 3 men instantly run out of the house and speed away. And here is where panic mode kicks in. B.M.F. knows they have to clear out the mansion before Atlanta police arrive. So they quickly pack everything into the cars and drive away. They leave Doc Marshall at the house to talk to the police, being that he's not a street guy. He tells the police of an intruder and that he has to scare them away. All of that is well within Georgia law, but here's where things go left. Somehow the police received the consent to search the house. Atlanta police took hours scouring through the house until they found a stash in one of the bedroom closets. For this, they arrest Doc Marshall and sent him to jail. B.M.F.'s continued operations and club incident. That's what we're all thinking, but not Big Meech or Terry. They were not alarmed, and it was business as usual. The only thing that changed was now, instead of house parties, they went to clubs. And everywhere Meech went, he came 100 deep of B.M.F. members. On top of this, they were known to start problems. November 12, 2004. It's a Friday night, and Big Meech and B.M.F. members head to Club Chaos. They throw money all night, and Meech starts talking to a girl. She happens to be the girlfriend of another man at the club. That would be Anthony Jones, also known as Wolf. And this guy happens to be P. Diddy's bodyguard. While at the club, Anthony approaches Meech and tells him to stop talking to his girl. Meech takes it as disrespect and gets Anthony out of his face. Anthony is furious, so he leaves the club. While the night continues, and Meech and his crew leave at 4 a.m. They head to the parking lot, and right there is Anthony Jones. A scuffle breaks out, and someone takes it to another level. The next day, Meech will go down for it. And this is where the story ends. I'm just kidding. He was actually released in self-defense a few weeks later. Atlanta police had no idea who they arrested, and that's kind of crazy to think about. They probably wrote him off as another rich executive in Atlanta. Little did they know he was running the biggest underground operation in the whole United States. Increased police scrutiny and BMF's growing reputation. The altercation with Anthony Jones, followed by Meech's arrest, marked a turning point for the BMF. While Meech was released on the grounds of self-defense, the violence surrounding the incident, paired with his high-profile presence in Atlanta's club scene, caught the attention of law enforcement. No longer were the authorities dealing with just a group of wealthy businessmen with questionable incomes. They were beginning to recognize the deeper criminal structure behind the BMF empire. The club scene became both a playground and a stage for BMF to showcase its power and influence. Wherever Big Meech went, it wasn't just about partying, it was about demonstrating dominance. Entering venues with a 100-strong entourage, throwing money in the air, and turning heads wasn't just entertainment. It was a message to anyone paying attention. BMF wasn't just running the drug trade, they were celebrities in their own right. This growing notoriety, however, came at a price. The chaos BMF stirred at clubs and public gatherings gradually turned them into a target. While Meech believed that the situation with Wolf had been resolved in his favor, it was a small spark in a much larger fire. Local law enforcement and the FBI couldn't overlook the opulence, the bodyguards, and the confrontations any longer. The sheer size of Meech's following, combined with their aggressive behavior, made them too big to ignore. The luxury cars, massive mansions, and carefree lifestyle clashed too sharply with the violence surrounding their operations. As a result, what might have been a minor dispute at Club Chaos quickly evolved into a catalyst for a far more intense police investigation, DA investigation, and wiretap. Even though Atlanta thought nothing of him, the D decided to look into him. So they contacted the IRS to look through Big Meech's tax returns. What they found is that he made $200,000 in the previous year. This wasn't enough to afford even one of his supercars. Better yet, this couldn't even cover the down payment on one of his mansions. Something wasn't right, so they presented this to a judge and they granted them a wiretap. Interestingly enough, the first person they tapped was Terry Flannery. They thought that this would be easy, but little did they know, Terry had 20 different phones. On top of this, he never actually said any names or locations over the phone. In fact, the entire BMF talked in their own specific code. They used nicknames and aliases for everything. The agents got frustrated and thought about giving up. But then Terry said something that pissed them off. While talking to an assistant, Terry said that police aren't smart enough to tap phones like they do in The Wire. This gave the agents a personal vendetta. They started staying up all night trying to figure out his code and track all of his calls. And eventually, they figured it out. The fall of BMF and cultural legacy, December 5th, 2004. It's a regular day in the BMF organization. And this means that another load is set to be delivered across the country. This time, a man named Jeffrey Lair is set to arrive at the Buckhead Mansion and head up to Louisville, Kentucky. So he arrives at the mansion, the car gets loaded, and he and his girlfriend hit the interstate. Little do they know the FBI was tracking the call when Terry set the order, and this means that they knew exactly when the delivery was going to take place. But instead of a big takedown, they decided to do something clever. They contacted Missouri State Troopers to do a routine traffic stop on Jeffrey Lair. This way, BMF would have no suspicion of a large investigation. While Jeffrey gets pulled over in Florissant, Missouri, they search the car and find everything they want. So Jeffrey gets arrested and thinks nothing of it. So he calls Terry from the county jail, boy. What a mistake. He tells Terry what happened, and this is all the feds needed. Half of the investigators wanted to arrest Terry right away, case closed, hopefully a 10-year sentence. But the other half wanted to use this evidence to take down the entire BMF organization. The reason some of the investigators wanted to finish it now was because BMF was so hard to crack. But the lead investigator figured that he could put hard pressure on Jeffrey Lair. So he told Jeffrey that he's facing 20 years unless he gives up some information. tough decisions. But in the meantime, B.M.F had no idea what was going on. B.M.F figured that Jeffrey would take his time. Meech and Terry's level of panic was -30. In fact, in 2005, Meech purchased a custom all-white Maybach, the only one in the United States. He also rented a $30,000 a month mansion on Miami Beach. Here, he hosted parties with all of the rappers. He also hosted vacations in Cancun, where he flew everyone out on his private jets. I would call this the calm before the storm. B.M.F felt untouchable and was not prepared for what was coming next. October 17, 2005. All 9 Atlanta mansions are raided by the FBI, but oddly enough, they don't find what they're looking for. Somehow B.M.F had cleared everything out just in time. So still, all they had was Terry's wiretap and Jeffrey Lair. So B.M.F's lawyers figured that Terry might do 10 years, but that's about it. Meech, on the other hand, had nothing against him. But then everything would crumble down. In late 2005, Doc Marshall took the witness stand against all of B.M.F. He had 36 members arrested, including Big Meech. This was it. The whole operation was done. All of the money, glory, chains, and mansions are over with. During the case, they could not believe how large this operation was. Some estimate that they were making over $300 million a year, while Terry and Demetrius were ultimately handed 30-year sentences. But since then, B.M.F has become a cultural icon. In fact, their name has been mentioned in hundreds of songs. Well, in 2020, Terry was released, and in 2026, Meech will be as well. And this prompted Leighton Simon to say that he believes that they snitched. No, you got to give up somebody. The story of B.M.F is more than just one of money, power, and excess. It's a chilling testament to how ambition can blur the line between kings and criminals, between luxury and ruin. From the shadows of Detroit to the bright lights of Atlanta, the Flannery brothers built an empire that seemed indestructible until it wasn't. Their story, like all empires built on quicksand, crumbled under the weight of their own audacity, leaving behind a trail of riches, betrayals, and countless unanswered questions. But the tale doesn't end with their arrests. Even now, whispers circulate in the streets. How did B.M.F rise so high and fall so swiftly? Was it fate, arrogance, or something much darker working behind the scenes? As we wait for Big Meech's return in 2026, the lingering question remains: will B.M.F rise from the ashes once again? Or is this the final chapter of their saga? History has a way of leaving clues behind for those who seek them. And the Black Mafia family's legacy still haunts the underground. Were they merely men of vision or masters of deception? The truth is buried deep, waiting to be unearthed. Now, as we close the book for now on this chapter of the underworld, remember, the darkness holds many more secrets. If you wish to unlock them, you must take the next step. But beware, once you enter the shadows, you may never see the light the same way again. So, if you're brave enough, if you're curious enough, dare to like this video. Share it with those who aren't afraid of the truth. And if you seek more stories hidden beneath the surface of the world you think you know, subscribe to Underworld Icons. After all, in the shadows, power and knowledge are reserved for those who are willing to search for them. But before you go, think about this. What truly defines an empire? Is it the wealth, the power, or the legacy left behind? The story of B.M.F is a mirror reflecting our own desires and fears. Are we drawn to their charisma, their audacity, or is it the cautionary tale of how ambition can lead to downfall? As we look back on their rise and fall, remember that every choice has a consequence, and every king has a reckoning. The allure of the underground may seem enticing, but it's filled with perilous traps. What would you have done in their shoes? Would you have chased the dream or played it safe? In the end, we are all faced with choices that shape our destiny. So let's ponder these questions together as we continue to explore the depths of the underworld. Until next time, keep your eyes open, and remember, Not everything is as it seems.